All right. So we're gonna do something a little bit different this week. Just trying out a new format. We've done obviously a healthy amount of shows in a different way. Let's start this off properly. Welcome to Full Circle. My name is Chad. I am Cheddar Caveman on lots of things on the internet. I'll be your host, as I said. Anyway, today I'm going to try to do something a little bit different. In the past, we've done basically just me sitting down, talking through models, units, tactics, some battle reports, things like that. But I have a visual format, so I felt like maybe it'd be cool to try to mix in a little bit of talk and a little bit of visual stuff. So I don't really know how this is going to go. As you can see, my setup here is not exactly perfect. My tripod was not cooperating quite as well as I had hoped. Neither was the space in my kitchen. That's why you see some peppers over there. They're delicious, though. And obviously, I couldn't quite. I'm actually going off the camera on my laptop rather than another webcam or appropriate cam. So some experimenting here where I'm just trying to mix it up a little bit. I'm just using this now kind of as a neutral-ish backdrop, so you don't have to see the rest of my kitchen back there, because that would be really unfortunate for mostly me. But today what I'm going to do is we're going to try this format. Sorry, I'm looking down, trying to get some rules out in front of me, to talk about the Celestial Fulcrum. So if you are not aware, the CID updates that were tested about 6 weeks ago, I want to say at this point, something like that, 4 to 6 weeks ago, went live on Wednesday, or I'm sorry, yesterday actually. Today's Wednesday. And basically, the last iteration we saw for the Celestial Fulcrum is what they decided to go forward with. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to show you a little bit of what's going on, and just a couple updates. Most of the battle engines went through as they were. I believe they're very close. If not, definitely take a look. We may at some point revisit the Sacro Vault. I may. We may check that out. Same with the Pharaoh Meat Thresher. I don't actually. That's one of the few things I actually don't own that plays for Circles. So that'll probably be pretty far down the road, because I'm not at the moment. I'm really sort of personally focusing on playing faction options, and I'm actually kind of focused a lot on Devourer's Host lists, as you've noticed, but looking mostly to keep with the in-faction theme. I do have most of the minions that play for Circle, though. Real quick, let's just talk through what the changes are. So I have War Room open. I'm just going to talk through what the Fulcrum now does. I may highlight some things that were changes, and then we're going to talk about a little bit of what to expect on the tabletop, and I've got a few things out here. So the Celestial Fulcrum is a Circle black-clad battle engine. Sorry, guys. It is Speed 5, Strength 10, Rat 6, Defense 10, Armor 19. It has a 10-inch command. It is a construct that is immune to cold, lightning, and fire, and it has Pathfinder, as all battle engines do. And you'll notice, if you've looked at War Room lately, they've started adding this, but there's a little marker that marks that it's 120 mil. That's to tell you the base size. So you'll see that on all cards going forward: 30, 40, 50, and 120 as is appropriate. It still has 3 range attacks, 3 initial range attacks. The Flame Blast is still range 11, rate of fire 1, AoE 4, power 15, and that is continuous fire, damage type fire, and damage type magical. It has a Lightning Bolt shot, which is range 13, rate of fire 1, no AoE, and power 14. And this shot is lightning typed and magical as well. And then Winter's Rage, which is the 10-inch spray. It is rate of fire 1, no AoE, because it's a spray, power 12, and it is cold and magic type. It is still 19 points, still field allowance 2, and now it has 28 boxes, so that is 8 more than it used to have. On the back, a few new things. Just to touch on the ranged attacks real quick. The Lightning Bolt gun still has Electro Leap. No, nothing unique with how Electro Leap works. Winter's Rage still has critical freeze, so if you crit, model hit becomes stationary unless it's immune to cold. The one thing, I will mention something that is not here because it's easy for people to make a mistake. The one thing that is not here anymore is the smoke rule on the fire ranged attack. They chose, due to complexity that was adding up with this model, to drop that as a rule on it. So you no longer leave an AoE. There was some confusion on that before too, like, well, if I run into it, is this or that? I mean, it's still straightforward, but I definitely did have a lot of questions on it from my opponents. Okay, additional rules on the back. So this is where you really want to start paying attention. Now, forget everything you know about what it used to do. There are some similarities here, but it'll really help if you focus on what it now does. So, circular vision, models never gain a backstrike bonus against this model. That one is not a change, actually. And just of note, that does not stop backstabs. So the rule backstab will still apply. Circular vision does not negate that at all. I've actually brought it up a couple times to developers. They seem to be okay with that interaction. I kind of think it's illogical, and I would love to see a change, but I have, for whatever reason, that seems to be okay. So anyway, that's my little bit on that. And then it has Fury Bank. So this is a new rule. While this model is in a friendly faction Warlock's control range, during the Warlock's activation, the Warlock can move Fury points from himself to it at any time. This model can have up to 3 Fury points at any time. During its combat action, this model can spend Fury points to boost 1 attack or 1 damage roll for each Fury point spent. Additionally, it is a gun platform. This model can make ranged attacks even while in melee. It has another new rule, Power of the Stones. During your control phase, this model can leech Fury from friendly faction construct war beasts in its command range. And then it has Veteran Leader Blackclad. While in this model's command range, other friendly Blackclad models gain +1 to attack rolls. And I did just remember I wanted to get one more model out. Excuse me. Apologies, guys. So I have a few things out here, but let's talk a little bit about the changes. So the big difference is it no longer just generates Fury. It needs either Leech Fury from a Construct Warbeast, World Reason is a very good example, or your Warlock, this is Kruger in this case, has to give it Fury. So your Warlock can activate, give it some Fury, etc. It doesn't lose Fury. Fury will stay on it. You can have up to 3. So it works similar in that regard to the Sentry Stone. So that's the first big change. And that change by itself, massive already, right? And the reason that's the case is because before you kind of could guarantee like 2 Fury in a turn, maybe 3 on one turn if you were careful, and that was strong in my opinion. If you managed it correctly, it could be quite strong. However, now you can, again, you still have to play this correctly, right? It doesn't produce it on its own, so you're either giving it 3 Fury from your Warlock, or you're leeching 3 Fury, or some combination thereof from your Warbeasts. However, the thing there is that if you play it correctly, you can guarantee 3 Fury turn over turn, especially if you have a more range-focused composition. And there's last change to make sure that you could get that Fury at the command of 10 does mean I think that melee options are viable as well. Okay, so that's the next change, and that is where the model becomes powerful, because now you can guarantee 3 boosts on any turn, assuming again that you can allocate the resources from your Warlock, or you have kept enough War Beasts on available to you. No, Construct War Beasts specifically. I didn't actually double check before this, and let's check now live. The Blackclad Stone Shaper does have a rule that says it can manipulate Fury on things, but I think it says War Beast specifically. It does. It does. So Quiet the Stones is War Beast, so you can't add. You can repair them though, so not something to dismiss there. And then finally, and this to me is the icing. This is not a reason by yourself to just play this, in my opinion, but I think the lists that can build with the proper synergy with it are going to like it, and that is Veteran Leader Blackclad. So every Circle Warlock, barring Chromac, Grail, and Wormwood, are Blackclads, and even in Wormwood's case, Cassie's is a Blackclad, of less importance, but just want to mention it. Those things are Blackclads. Obviously, in addition, you've got the Druid Mistriders. Pardon me. You've got the Druid's Vorboros unit, Blackclad Wayfarers, Blackclad Stone Shapers, the Stoneward model from the Wold Shrimp. He's a Blackclad. The Druid Wilder's a Blackclad, although that's likely not to ever matter. And the Stone Shaper command attachment for the Shifting Stones is a Blackclad. And odds are good we will get more Blackclad models. It's pretty central to what Circle does. I would imagine future Warlocks are going to continue to be Blackclads. I would imagine that we will see more types of Druid units, more types of Druid solos, and so forth. So, obviously, this guy is here to stay. So, just something to go over. But, anyways, my point being, I would not just take the Fulcrum for that +1. I think the +1 is very strong with a few of our casters that we know are going to be slinging offensive spells. I got Kruger out here very intentionally. I think it's very strong. And attacks. Don't forget it counts for attacks. So I think Kruger's probably takes the best advantage of it. However, Mosar, Una, even to a degree Tanith, Bradagus loves it, which is sort of not something people would think of, but I'll sort of talk about that in a second. I'm trying to think if anybody else really comes to mind. I don't really think any of the Kayas, you're not really going to be, I don't really see that being a thing too much. Morvana 1 likes to sling spells. I could maybe see it. But I also think she kind of plays well with a Wold Wrath, which also kind of enables her slinging of spells. So I think if you're going to go the large base route there. Baldur 2 is actually not a bad place. I know a lot of people have been testing that. It's a pretty tanky piece when you can get it up to armor 22. It's going to be able to do a lot of work for you, and it's also going to let your beasts, if you're going to play that like in a Bones of Orboros list with like a Wold Wrath and maybe 1 or 2 of these and a Megalith and some other stuff, Baldur wants to like keep some Fury, but you need to be able to leech some Fury. So I think, and that's sort of the same thing with Bradagus, right? He only wants to be spending so many resources, and he's obviously going to be taking Wold Beasts, and I think the Fulcrum could fit in there very well as another way to supplement your list. So that is that's kind of what we've got going on with that. So, but let's talk a little bit about tactics. So the first thing, I'm going to go ahead and mark out. We're going to pretend we're going first, and my table's actually a little longer than the thing. But so let's just say we're going first. And I've set up sort of this is a pretty generic table, but we know we'll see this in the center a lot. Could be this house over here. I don't have any walls, but imagine those could be there. Sort of picture any of the scenario zones. They tend to be pretty central. Hopefully this camera thing isn't, I want to sort of still have my face on here, but you're going to see my hands over here. So, but let's just give you an example. So this is the number one thing that I think, and this is a huge change from Mark II to Mark III. And I'm actually going to go ahead and grab, I should have done this ahead of time as well. All right, we're going to grab some measuring things, and I'll explain why in a minute. One of the biggest changes, and just to give a quick shout out, these are Musa Mini's precision measuring tools. Work very well. You get a lot of different ones out of a small area there, so we'll just double check here, make sure, yeah, we're good. Okay. So, let's go ahead and just deploy this little guy here. Let's deploy Kruger. So obviously I don't have a full battle group by any means, but you can kind of start to get the idea. So then we're going to deploy our shifting stones, and it's very important. There's probably some others that have some better tricks to do this. I have not actually been playing this, but what I'm doing here is measuring to make sure that this is exactly 5 inches apart, and this is the leader model. So the reason I'm going to do that, I'll show you in a moment. But one of the things that you can do now in Mark III is place battle engines. Sorry, you can always place battle engines, but you can place this one. It used to have a rule specifically preventing it because the shifting stone is placed within 8, not completely within, and that would have been about a 13-inch place. And at the time, double teleporting was legal, so the amount of like distance that you could actually teleport up the table was kind of deemed ridiculous. And that was before adding in, you know, this guy who could also do some more placement shenanigans. So I understand why the rule was there. I always thought TK was a fair spell to use on it. 2 inches is not so bad, but 13 is kind of egregious. So the same thing is going to apply with Mirage on Una and Mosar, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so what I've done is very purposefully made sure that there's a 5-inch gap here. I'm assuming we're going first, but this trick works if you go second, but you may want to be a little bit more cautious with doing so. Now, you might ask yourself, well, what is it that you're looking to do here? Well, what I'm looking to do here is place this thing at just an absolutely ridiculous place on the table. So, caster independent for a moment, it can run 10 inches on turn 1. So I'm using, just as a pro tip, I would almost always try to use, with any huge base, I would try to use some sort of template or get your tape measure very close to the table. It is very easy when looking over top of the models to mismeasure. I've seen it a lot. People don't really intend to do it, but it will happen a lot. So you can use this. Another trick that you can do as well is, you'll notice, let's see if I can get this close enough that you can read the numbers on it. You may not be able to read the numbers there. There you can see the 10 on the end. So a sprite template along the one edge is a 10-inch rule. So the fulcrum can run 10 inches, and that's what we're going to do. And I spaced it 5 inches because a huge base is a hair under 5 inches. So just so you know, because if it's 5 inches, it'll fit. So you can run to here. If this were Una or Mosar, before doing this, I would recommend having cast Mirage on it if you want a 2 additional inches. So it can be there. That's 10-inch run. You will be at the 17-inch line to right here after that run. And that, in some games, is a perfectly reasonable place. It would be 20, obviously, if you were going second. So now, however, it's in these shifting stones, as I was sort of getting at. And one of the things that means you can do is place this guy. So let's go ahead and do that. So I measured. I'm just going to place real quick. All right. that fulcrum has now gone from 17 inches to 25. I'm actually an inch past the middle of the table. This is the bottom one, or sorry, the top one. This model is an inch past the center line. Now, it's killable, right? Even 1019 with 28 boxes, obviously is a very killable stat line. I mean, that's worse than most heavies in the game. They die all the time. So it is immune to some elements, so that will help you, but by no means assume that this is a play you should do if they have something that can reach you from their advanced deployment, or possibly advanced move, things like that. However, there's a lot of things that will never be able to go that far, and now what you've really done, and this is before we've even factored in Mirage, so Mirage can make it go another 2 inches. It's the easiest, I would call that the easiest application of this particular ability, because as you can see now I have to get Kruger within 8 inches of it. So he's basically going to have to get to where it left from, which means he's going to have to like TK himself. But I'm going to use this to illustrate. So that said, there are other ways around that. So let's say you had Megalith in the list or a Wold Warden. You could trample 8 inches to here, and then you're within 8. So you could again TK this another 2 inches. So that's a 27 inch line. Let's just show you that for just so you can see. So we're that far up the table. I could do that also on the next turn, right? I could just have everybody run just like they'd always do. So you know, you're up 10. He maybe charges something, failing. He can be up there. Your Fulcrum's up there. Now, keep in mind, this is way out in front of your army. Again, if they have something that can threaten that far, do not do this. You will lose 19 points of your army for nothing. If they have a lot of infantry or a lot of other things that they need to deal with, you can get the guy right there. So, that's one piece to note. Also, you can easily see, so let's just use this, easy tell. So here's 10 inches. This is how far you're going to be able to get Veteran Leader out. Okay. So, simple enough. Tying it up in melee won't matter. It has gun platform. The only thing it will stop is its ability to aim, which you'll want a lot of the time, of course. I think I put a Wold Weird here very intentionally, as I find it to be one of the strongest options with it, because now you've got a range piece, you've got another range piece. You could bring 2 of these in a Fulcrum, and frankly, your Warcaster may never ever have to look at that battle group to leech feud. Pardon me. Also, I may be out of camera here to actually show this, but you can shoot 13 inches from there. Now, I can't shoot this turn, obviously, because I moved it already, but I'm almost in the deployment zone, and that's without the that is with the TK move. Just to back this up a little bit, so we're gonna go back here. We'll do get our 7 inches to make sure we are about where we need to be. Okay, let's do this. Another thing, this is actually, let's measure 10 inches out. So this is probably a better tactic if you're going second. So let's go 10 inches out. So about there. Keep in mind this may not be exactly perfect, as you know, we're doing demonstrations. But now let's set up our shifting stones. Just something like this. So we want to make sure. I'm actually kind of intentionally putting this one up farther so that I'm going to measure, make sure that's 16. I'm just sort of weighing it. What I'm doing here with the shifting stones. So I guess while we're talking about this, this is also going to be partially a shifting stone discussion, I guess. What I'm doing is leaving it so I have the ability. Actually, I'll switch this through real quick. Have the ability to place something here. So now let's say we're going second. Let's say they have some fast AD troops, something like Mage Hunters. Probably not Statixis Raiders. They can be immune to blast, which is some of what you want to do, and they get +2 to ranged defense or whatever. But now we can do the same sort of thing that we were looking at before. So we're on the 10-inch line here, right? I'm in this triangle of shifting stones because it's kind of hard to see here, but I've tucked this behind there so they're inside the line here. Just a reminder, you only have to be within 4 shifting stones. So what I can do, let's make sure this will actually place, but is this model can go to here, so that's 8 inches. So we've teleported within 8. Now, additionally, I have Kruger, so I can telekinesis it an additional 2 inches. Now I'm there. And now we have gone to the 20-inch line, which means on this turn, I can threaten out, let's see, 20 and 13 is going to put you at 33. 48, 7, 41, another 6 is going to be 35. So you're about 2 inches in front of their AD line. Is where the lightning shot can drop. The fireball's 2 inches farther back, and the spray obviously another inch back from there. So if they decide they want to get cheeky and come all the way forward with a lot of their infantry, especially infantry, I think if they bring a heavy up within that range, you're really going to want to be considering what kind of heavy it is and what your options are. Because if that heavy can charge it, you're going to be in trouble. If a few infantry can shoot at it or charge it, you're going to be in a lot less trouble. That said, I mean, Kruger can also still cast Windstorm and be here, and even TK himself to there, you know, giving you some range defense out pretty far to help keep this guy safe. Additionally, and a lot of this is telekinesis tricks, I guess, as well, but I think that's probably relevant to a lot of you. The spot that we were at, we could have fired off some shots from there and then TK it back. So, something to keep in mind. Obviously, and I've sort of showed, I didn't get out, I do actually own another Fulcrum, but I did not get it out. But something to keep in mind is if this were another Fulcrum, say over here, they do give themselves the bonus as long as they can keep each other within their 10 inches. Now, that's a lot of points. You're talking 38 points at that juncture, and you're going to need to have some number of wolds that you can use to actually bring that fury back. So that's going to get to be a little bit tricky. I don't think it's impossible. There's probably some good lists there. I think the Baldur 2 things that I've mentioned are probably one of the places I would consider doing that. And keep in mind, you may not need fury on it every single turn to be doing, for it to be strong in your list. Pardon me one moment. Had a little wind going on there. Again, this is not my typical setup, so apologize for any awkwardness. But that's something else that you can do. Another good thing to keep in mind is its damage types are elemental. So if you're playing, at this point, Druids of Orboros are one of our only options that does this, but it may be worth doing even in a pinch. You can, so let's say, something that you can always make sure that you want to do is you can run, so let's say you need your spray to go here, you can always run to make sure that you have a model. I mean, this is true for sprays everywhere, but just to highlight it for some of you who maybe haven't thought about it or not sure, you can run, a Druid specifically is a good idea because they are immune to, they can become, and when I say run, they'll have to advance, but they can become immune to all the elements. This will let you line up your spray wherever. You can do the same thing with the AoE if you need to hit a clump of guys, but you need something in the middle. Drop the AoE. Keep in mind that the guns are damage type magical, so while you could use something like, say, a Feral Geist, which is incorporeal and can run to that spot, keep in mind you almost certainly kill it with the shot that you're going to take because it's very low armor. Other tricks. There used to be a few other tricks with the Fulcrum with the Smoke Cloud. Unfortunately, like I said, that rule no longer present. You used to be able to set up like places to trigger prowl, for example. So a little bit of a bummer that that's missing. It was a little bit bigger of a deal than some people thought. A lot of people sort of hand waved at it not being that good, and I think it was actually quite good. Pardon me. However, I do think the trade-off was worthwhile. It now has a lot more offensive power, and it's still supporting the army using Quiet the Stones and Veteran Lander Blackclad. So it's very good in that regard. I was hoping that we might have people in the chat today while I was doing this live to see if they had any questions. I didn't mention this, but really any movement tactic that we can add to it is going to be great. Hellmouth does not work. It's a push. Battle engines can't be pushed. However, we do have telekinesis, as I mentioned. We have Mirage, which is basically a delayed telekinesis for it specifically. We also have, I don't know that I think it synergizes with enough else of what's going in this list, but Grail's feet would move at 3 inches. Something to keep in mind. And something just to illustrate, a 3-inch move in this game is not inconsiderable, right? Table's only 48 inches long, 3 inches, and really you end up playing on a lot less than the 48 inches when it gets down to it. So, what else moves it? I did mention Bradigus is another home for it, and again, I actually think that is so. Sort of getting away from the tactics a bit, but one of the things that you have to keep in mind when you're adding a piece is what does the piece do for the list, what does the piece do for the caster, and what does the caster do for and the list do for the piece, right? So in Kruger's case, if you're going to build a list with Kruger that involves the Fulcrum, you're really looking at a situation where kind of all that stuff comes together, right? Kruger loves the +1 to hit. His ranged attack, it's great. His spells, it's great. He can play a pretty reasonable ranged army between his feet, pushing things off so that you can keep shooting. Between telekinesis, obviously the benefits there. Windstorm will keep things safe, etc. Also, he's one of the few that does have some options for a pretty decent ranged assassination. You're gonna need a little something else with this, but as talked about, you're gonna need that anyways. Things like Gallows are gonna be good to help your threat range as well. Pardon me. We went over, I showed you some of the placement situations too. But really those are going to apply to anything in the list. I think it's just important to illustrate how much firepower you can get up into pretty far up into a spot. If you need to. I know a lot of people have played that with Una as well. You can put the battle engine up ridiculously far, and then you can also cycle Hand of Fate to it, which is going to make it pump out some pretty significant firepower. So, I'm trying to think if there's anything I've forgotten that I wanted to make sure I mentioned. Those are mostly it for now. Something to keep in mind too, against Legion and Protectorate particularly, is it is immune to elements. So if you notice here, this thing is never being shot to death by Reckoners and whatnot. Now there are things that can, Redeemers in particular, watch out for, especially if they can aim. In Legion, a Naga is going to be present a lot, as is something like Lilith. So, but most of the rest of their shots are going to be fire type. So in those cases, while normally I would tell you you want Kruger to be very forward, and maybe you don't even have Kruger, maybe it's Mosar or something, to project their ranged threats, in some cases you may want to consider the fact that you can actually hide behind this pretty well. And if you couple it with, you know, we have it here, now I can be, you know, rough terrain here, or in rubble here, behind this, I've got a pretty good chance that I can get up the field closer. So that's just another tidbit to keep in mind. Its guns are magical. Definitely keep that in mind. Crix does not like that in general. Protector doesn't like it either, and because they want to stop you shooting with Acquire, and basically you can give that the middle finger. So, all right. These same tactics work very well. Should work with the Sacral Vault and the Meat Thresher, specifically with Kruger, because Telekinesis does not care about faction. Mirage is a friendly faction spell, so if you're looking at Mosar or Una, you're going to want to stay with Fulcrum. And just to be clear, these do not work with Gargantuans. They specifically have a clause that says they cannot be placed. So, unfortunately, that's the case. A couple other synergies just to talk about real quick. It is making ranged attacks. Therefore, the Argus Moonhound has the potential to be a very strong piece. Again, giving it +2 to hit is going to be, if you can get that guy within 5 inches of something, is very strong. Also removing stealth, very strong, since, again, something that you might previously have been worried about being able to hit. Now you ignore stealth, you're good to go. So just something to keep in mind there. A Pureblood, another strong piece. It already has magic weapons, but being able to ignore buffs is essentially a pseudo damage buff to it. Curse of Shadows casters like Mosar and Wormwood are certainly worth consideration, since they additionally just literally buff the damage, and you can still apply Wraithbane in addition, so that's another good approach. For similar reasons to the Argus Moonhound, the Wild Argus, if you can get it in position, or if your Warlock can get in position, another very strong piece to be turning, making something defense 5 if it's living or undead. So that's a very, very potentially strong synergy. Megalith has similarly strong synergies with his Animus that reduces defense by 2. And Megalith has the additional advantage of being a construct, so you can leech Fury from it. And even another step better, he's a construct that has the ability, generally speaking, to do both ranged and melee attacks. So there you go. Okay. Other synergies, I mentioned the Pureblood. Warlock-wise, I've kind of gone over everybody, but you want to look for things that buff up what it does and aren't doubling down on what it does. So I personally don't really love it with, say, Baldur 1. I don't really think Baldur 1 does enough for it. And I don't think it does enough for Baldur. He only has like 1 attack spell. You generally, my builds at least, are generally not using it. And so forth. So Baldur 1, not necessarily where I go. Baldur 2, on the other hand, very defensive. Wants to be able to kill infantry. Wants to be able to sort of ask that question, do you want to come forward and deal with my brick, or do you want me to keep shooting you? So that's strong. Kruger can pretty much stop you from even getting on it for several turns if you position it carefully, depending on their composition. But Kruger 1 on the other side really wants to crack armor, and this, with the ability to boost its POW 15, POW 14 rolls, is going to be very strong, but not necessarily to the point that Kruger 1 would want to take it. I think you're going to need him. There's other things that you're going to want to play with him. Morvana's interesting. The rerolls are quite good. But that's really the biggest factor there. That said, rerolls on crit stationary attacks can certainly change the tide of the game very quickly. Being able to get a pretty good odds on an assassination by enabling that could be very, very good. Another oddball thing you wouldn't expect, Kaya 1 can actually make it stealthy. Battle engines can be stealth. And Kaya 1 has occultation, so it's a really strong spell to consider here. Just sort of going through the roster in my head of everything else. Morvana 1 doesn't strike me as something particularly synergistic. Say Kruger's very good. Baldur 2. Wormwood I think is worth thinking about. I don't think it's the first place I look. Una 2, if you need an additional range presence, it's going to be pretty solid. Mosar, I think, Dan Yount has played it in his list prior to these changes, and I'm pretty sure with the changes he's only more excited to see what it can do. I would just guess. Maybe we'll try to talk to Dan at some point and see. I have not asked him about that, so no promises. Yeah, so that's been about 40 minutes on the fulcrum. I'd actually hoped to do a little bit more over here on the table. Unfortunately, the fulcrum is actually pretty straightforward these days. There's only so many tricks you can do. I would say the biggest thing is to know is strut ranges. Know sort of some of the ridiculous things you can do. Any given turn, it can be, if you position correctly, you can have it 10 inches from where it started rather than 5, if you need to. You can also pull it back, keep it safer. So, all things to consider. Yeah. So hopefully you like this change of pace. I'm thinking about doing a few other tips and tactics like this. I need to, and I'm going to try to be thinking a little bit more about ways that I can do this as I'm playing my games. I'm going to try to do that anyways. I know somebody asked me to look into things like top of 2 assassination options. There's a few things there. I've played a couple of the options there we can certainly talk about. We can... the Devourer's host list with the Ravagers, I think there's probably some positioning things there that would be interesting to talk about and sort of my mindset with that. I'm by no means the only person playing that, nor, I don't want to, I'm not the only person that could talk about it, but I'm sure there's some things there that are worth considering that we can discuss. Yeah. So those are the ones off the top of my head. If you have any ideas as you watch the show and you have comments, please leave them there. I'm certainly looking for more ideas on how to do this. I would like to do some actual battle reports, potentially. That said, my tripod may not suit my purposes for that at present, at least not without some help, which is what I had to do. It's actually in a box so that I can get it high enough for this. And I've sort of got a weird... the way it wants to display the camera is sort of behaving not in a helpful way. So, yeah. So, sorry if the episode turned a little rambly. Sorry if you expected a little more over here. Hopefully this little bit was helpful, though. Like I said, let me know if you have any other ideas. Real quick, shout out to some sponsors. Muso Minis. They've been fantastic. I need to actually get my videos out on their site. If I ever get a chance to sit down and turn these into audio podcasts, Muse has offered to host me for that as well. So I need to see if I have time to do that. Only so much time in my week, of course. And of course, shout out to Griffin's Roost Painting. All the things you see painted here, not the 2D terrain, were painted by Griffin's Roost. Actually, she did most of these a lot longer ago than her recent work, but nonetheless, very awesome work. GriffinsRoostPainting.com, Griffin's Roost Painting on Facebook. Reach out if you have a display quality, high-end tabletop quality model you're looking to get her to paint. Go ahead and shoot over a message and she'll see what she can do. I am hoping soon to show off my finished Storm Raptor. It's been a little while in the making, and I know there's some I may have to wait because I think there's some special stuff being planned for it, but I'm excited to potentially show it off. So, and on that note, I would like to thank everybody for watching. We'll hopefully catch you next week. Bye.